People who experience ghost, demonic encounters, what's your story? I believe I was haunted by something. Now I know they are called guardians. Entities sent to a person to be stalked by it. I have a vivid memory of my family staying over to sleep in my GGP house. They gave us some hammocks and some blankets. I tend to wake up around 3 to have something to eat, 2 cookies or more. We were in the living room, and near my hammocks was a small table with cookies. My mom prepared it beforehand, knowing I would get hungry, and didn't want me to bother others in their sleep. In front of the table was the door, that while it usually remained open, 'cause it was a small safe town, and all the neighbors left their doors wide open during the night, but since we were there they decided to close and lock it to make us feel comfortable. Next to it was a big window with iron bars. The window was basically a wall extending almost from the floor to the roof and from column to column. I took a couple of cookies and ate them, without looking up. I felt a chill on my body. Something telling me by instinct that something bad was about to happen. The goosebumps didn't take long to invade all my body, and that's when I heard it. Tick, tick, tick. There was someone or something tapping the iron bars of the window, trying to get my attention. I looked up and saw a pale head, with black veins with no hairs. The place where the eyes were supposed to be were empty, just pure infinite darkness. And it was smiling. It wasn't filled with endless razor-sharp teeth or unnaturally bent fangs. It was just a smile, the type of smile that was unnaturally big, taking 3/4 of its face, and no tongue, pure darkness beyond the row of teeth. I could see its body, just the long neck, and the long pale hands that ended with black tips and nails pointing at the door. I felt a compulsion to open the door, and got nearer and nearer, step by step. Felt my mind trapped screaming, but no sound from my mouth, while my body moved, despite my unwillingness. I don't know what happened, but something snapped inside me, and somehow while my little hand was on the lock I was able to regain my senses. I remember crying in silence and managing to get back to my hammock. The thing eventually left the window, not without reminding me it was still there, with the endless taps on the iron bars. I don't remember how, when, or if I slept the remaining of the night, but the next memory is my family receiving the news that the neighbor died due to a heart attack in the middle of the night. He was found next to his door. There is no way for me to confirm this since, like I said, while it was a vivid memory for me, my family insist that such things never happened because we always left before sunset. Ever since then, I had a phobia to see a window wide open in the middle of the night. I always kept my curtains closed after sunset, but every once in a while, I heard it, reminding me it was still waiting for me to open the door. Tick, tick, tick. I was a math teacher for a few years. In my 3rd year of teaching, everything started falling off my walls. I tried command strips, masking tape, double-sided tape, duct tape, and finally Gorilla Tape. Didn't matter. Never failed that I'd be in the middle of teaching and a poster or something from the bulletin board would loudly hit the floor. I eventually quit putting items back up and just had a stack of fallen misfits laying on the floor behind my desk. One morning after something fell, a student asked if I knew why everything kept falling. I replied no, and she said it was the ghosts. They were playing and knocking things off the wall. She explained to the class that her grandparents were shamans, and she could see ghosts, spirits. The kids freaked out, and I just went along with it every time something else fell, blaming it on the ghosts having fun. The next semester it stopped. Everything was sticking to the walls and back to normal. I saw that same student walking into the class next to mine, and went over to the teacher. I asked that teacher if she had any issues with things falling off the walls, and her response was, "It's the strangest thing, I've never had this problem before, but nothing will stay up." I realized I didn't have any issues before or after having that girl in my class. Only that semester. Maybe, just maybe, the ghosts were following her around. I've had a good amount of paranormal instances, but the one that affected me the most was that I would always see this man everywhere when I was growing up. And I mean like the grocery store, at school, in my house, etc. I even saw him when my family and I moved overseas. He has always dressed in the same clothes and would never get too close. And he was never there for too long, either. It was never creepy. It was just like he was checking in. And as I got older, I saw him less and less. By the time I was 16, I hadn't seen him for a while. And during this time, my father reconnected with his biological father's side of the family. When my dad was 2, his mom left his father because he was mildly abusive and suffered a lot from the war. And since my grandmother moved away, she lost all contact with our former in-laws, which is why my dad never really knew them. My dad met his father when he was 18, after my grandfather had sobered up and was actually an AA sponsor, and ended up devoting the rest of his life to helping other veterans. Unfortunately, my father was not over what happened with his mother or how he treated his mother, and just wasn't ready to make a relationship with him. Additionally, in his eyes, he already had a dad, which was his stepdad and the man who raised him. My grandfather would die a year later from organ failure. Jumping back to when I was 16, my father was contacted by a woman who claimed to be his cousin. She explained that her mother was my dad's aunt and had been looking for him and his siblings for years. They all talked 4 months on the phone. And during the summer before my junior year in high school, my dad and I took a trip to visit his whole extended family. During this time, we could visit my grandfather's grave, get to know what he was like post-recovery, and reconnect with a family my father didn't know was looking for him. Their instant connection was so beautiful, and since that year, we have all gone on holidays together, spent Thanksgiving and Christmas together, and seen each other as much as possible. But that isn't really the point of this story. The point is that when we were visiting his family, we started going through photo albums, and before this time, I had never seen what my grandfather looked like. So you can imagine my surprise when the man I saw for my entire life was the man I now call Grandpa. While visiting the Titanic Museum, my friend and I were excited to see pieces of White Star Line first-class china, silverware, and other artifacts that had been brought up from the depths of the Atlantic Ocean. There was velvet roping around an authentic Titanic deck chair with a model in period costume, reclining. We joked with the women while shuffling past with our group that this job must be delightful. Being able to watch people all day while seated, lounging struck us as rather ideal. She just smiled. At the end of our tour, most people were filtering out of the museum. We stopped and jokingly asked our guide how to land such a great job, repeating what we'd said to the woman on the deck chair. He began to laugh. He said, "Oh, you saw Miriam. She's not always here, but we welcome her anytime, honey." We asked how much that would pay, and he laughed again. "Miriam is our name for our ghost," he said. "And then, you don't think we'd let just anyone sit in our Titanic deck chair, do you?" I went to uni in South Africa, and I lived in a flat apartment that was next to a hotel. The Radisson actually. My light would every now and again switch itself on and off, which I figured was an electrical failure, but the creepiest would be if I left the room for a few minutes and came back to find the light on or off. Like even the switch would be pushed down. I used to sleep with my curtains open. One day I woke up to go to the bathroom. It was very late. My room was across the restaurant. Suddenly, I saw a man walking across the restaurant in a tux, and I was like, odd. There weren't usually any people up there at night. I come back from the bathroom, and I see him walk past again, in the same direction. At this point I feel a little uneasy. I scooch closer to the window. Please note I'm in the dark while the restaurant lights are on, so I can see this person, but they shouldn't be able to see me. The person again passes by, headed in the same direction. And now I'm really creeped out because I don't see them when they come back. It's as if there are many people who look exactly the same who are passing by the same spot. Anyway, the third time around he stops, turns and cups his hands around his eyes while looking through the window, as if he is looking right at me. I ducked, crawled out of my room, and spent the night in the living room. When I was pregnant with my second child, I would have insanely vivid dreams. Usually just random things, but one night, I dreamed about what I'd come to know as the Hat Man. I'll give a little background for context in the dream. My friend Anna recently moved to a different home, and her friend, Charlotte, moved into the old one. I and Charlotte were only acquaintances, but since Anna had lived in the home, I was very familiar with it. In my dream, I was walking up to the house with my husband and my oldest daughter. I was coming to babysit for Charlotte. It was super foggy and dark, with no other houses around it, nothing but a man sitting outside of the fence. He had his back turned to us, just staring at the house as he sat in a wheelchair. The feeling I had was extremely uneasy, and something about the man was just off. He appeared to be middle-aged, nothing stood out besides the wheelchair and his hat. The closer I got, the more I somehow knew that this was not a good person. In fact, he was not a person at all, but something pretending to be one, and the wheelchair was only a guise for him to seem like he was not of any threat. Don't ask me how I knew all this. It's just the dream logic, I guess. I said to my husband, as we came up beside him, almost passing the entrance to the gate, "Don't look at him, don't talk to him." For whatever reason, I looked at his face then, and he started to change. I can't really describe what he became, but as it grew and morphed, I could sense his anger fuming as he became this distorted, towering thing. We quickly rushed past him and into the house. He had disappeared. When I got into the house, nothing was right. It was abandoned and dilapidated, save for a worn kitchen table with 3 little girls, all in the same onesie. I could see 2 were twins, and one slightly older. Now Charlotte only has 1 son and a toddler girl, and I have never babysat for her or met her children. I told Anna about the dream a few days later. I always tell people my dreams. I think they're entertaining and weird, and I'm sure anyone who has the misfortune of hearing about them probably just thinks the latter. She agreed it was a weird dream, and said Charlotte had been talking about her son complaining of a ghost or something in his closet at night scaring him. She told Charlotte about my dream shortly after she reached out to me privately, and what she said sent shivers down my spine. Before her daughter was born, she had a miscarriage, twins, and her son had been intermittently telling her about some ghost that came out of his closet at night, with a weird hat on. She also said she had been extremely depressed and feeling very off lately. Charlotte asked if I had ever heard of the Hat Man, but I never had, and just as well the hat in my dream wasn't the same type as the one her son described when he talked about the thing that was in his room at night. I told her all the details of my dream, and we ended our convo agreeing it was very strange. I didn't talk to her again after that. Honestly, I had forgotten about all of it since I was so busy with a toddler and would be giving birth soon. My pregnancy was hard and postpartum was harder. I immediately had severe PPD, and my brain went to some scary places during that time. I don't want to get into that part much, but I'm really lucky to still be here now writing this. One day a few months after I had my second daughter, I laid down on the couch to sleep while the baby sleeps. I was in some weird, half-dream, half-awake state when I heard and felt someone come to the edge of the couch, standing behind where my head was. I got the feeling it was a man, and he was frightened. Just as fast as he appeared, he disappeared, and something was left standing behind him. The sense of dread I felt throughout my entire body was so intense. I felt the heat burning through my body just before I jerked awake. As I opened my eyes, jolted upright and turned to face what was behind me, I caught a strange glimpse. It was something like a fleeting shadow, just a black outline, shadow type thing. A tall man, wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Then in a blink he vanished. What the hell did I just see? What the hell just happened? I don't even know why I said anything, it just came out of me. Why? And in a quiet, retreating voice that was not my own, but unmistakably a man's. I hear. Because you invited me in. After the initial shock and questioning my sanity, I realized that whatever that thing was, it was the very same energy I had felt from the man in a wheelchair in my dream months before. I'm not one to believe in stuff like this, and quite honestly it was the last thing I was thinking about since I was so busy and tired. I googled the description of what I saw and scrolled through the images. There it was. The dark silhouette wearing the same hat with the caption, "The Hat Man." A few years ago I was asleep, but wasn't. I saw myself lying there, and a girl was standing next to my bed and my sleeping body. I saw myself, but I knew I was not in that body. She did not. She tried to communicate with me via telepathy or something by staring at me. At first I thought she wanted to do harm. Then I felt like she was scared and wanted to tell me something, but did not know how. The next morning I woke up and was irritated. This dream was so different from the usual one. I also remembered that she looked like she had been through stuff, while I was still trying to piece it together. I went to work and opened the browser on my computer to look at the news, which I usually don't do. The first headline I see is a plane crash with school children on board, matching the age of the girl that stood at my bed. To this day, I am convinced when I look at the pictures of two of the girls that were on the plane, that one of them was the one standing at my bed. There is one picture that shows them before departure, and it seems she was wearing the exact clothes I saw her with. When I was 20, I moved into a house with my girlfriend. It was in a decent part of town, and really, really cheap. The only downside was the landlord didn't live in my state and didn't speak English, so repairs took time. Thanks to a series of events involving my GF's job making her come into work and her brother being a flake, I ended up moving in everything by myself. 10 minutes into the move I had the first encounter. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a black dog looking up the stairs at me. I thought I was hallucinating from exhaustion, but then my dog, a large German shepherd who was upstairs with me, walked over to the stairs and started growling, looking straight at it. The dog casually walked away. I ran downstairs and looked everywhere but couldn't find it. We both saw the dog a few more times and had a few other weird experiences in the house. But there was one that was beyond a doubt a paranormal experience. It was what caused us to move out. Our master bedroom was upstairs. It was a particularly hot summer, and the old air condition wasn't cooling upstairs very efficiently, so we slept in a bedroom on the main level that I was using as my computer room. This room always had a weird vibe to it, and we had noticed that our dog, who typically followed us everywhere, would not go in. Instead, he would lie down in front of the doorway and wait for us. He was a little strange at times, so we wrote it off as that. At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up being violently shaken. As I came to, I could feel a hand firmly holding my arm and shaking me back and forth. Thinking the house was on fire and my GF was trying to wake me, I jumped up and turned around to get out of bed. That put me face to face with what a lot of people would call a shadow person. It was a black mass, vaguely in the shape of a human, but I could clearly see it by the light of the streetlight outside of the window. I could feel freezing cold air pouring off of it, thinking I was dreaming and my GF was still trying to wake me. I turned around only to see her still in the bed, still sound asleep. I turned back around, and the shadow was still there. Now wide awake, and full of adrenaline, I withdrew back away from it. After having sufficiently scared the bejesus out of me, the shadow slowly turned away from me, lumbered towards my door, and out into the hallway. My dog, who was sleeping in the hall, woke up and skittered backward into the bedroom towards me, terrified. I sat on the bed and collected myself, before jumping back out of the bed and going to the hall. I turned the light on and of course, it was gone. I didn't wake my girlfriend up, but I also didn't sleep until the sun came back up. I told my GF about it the next day. We called the landlord and told her that we were moving out. I told her the house was haunted and we were not staying after the current month. She seemed to understand and didn't protest it at all. So I've always been sensitive to the paranormal. Apparently, these were things a 6-year-old wouldn't really know about. Fast forwards about 14 years, and I'm living with my grandparents. They purchased a home in a subdivision, and picked a plot of land to have it built on, so they were the first and only people living in this home. I would see shadows and little glowing balls of light, here and there. Nothing too creepy. Except for the hallway. They had an L-shaped hallway, and my bedroom was at the end of the hallway. So to get to my bedroom, I would have to turn a corner and go to the end of the hallway. Right after turning the corner, we would feel a sense of dread, like something was right behind you about to snatch you up. But once you crossed the threshold to your bedroom, the feeling went away. This happened every time, day or night. Then there was one night, my grandmother and my husband were watching TV. Just some comedy movie I don't remember. Anyways, the computer room doors were in the living room. They were double doors and opened up wide. While we were watching the movie, we heard children laughing. The only child in the home was my 1-year-old, and she was sleeping on the couch next to my husband, so I got up and opened the doors, expecting to see my grandpa on the computer watching some videos. The lights were off and there was nobody there. We shrugged it off, finished our movie and went to bed. The next morning we were all in the kitchen talking about the previous night, and my brother and his girlfriend walked in. They asked what we were talking about, so I told them about the children laughing. They both turned pale and looked at each other. Turns out they had an Ouija board and were playing with it that previous afternoon. They started to hear children laughing outside their bedroom and quickly said goodbye and then put the board in the den. I told them to burn it, and we never heard the laughing again.